We are Midnight Stories. Listen to our stories for your daily sleep ritual. And now, have fun. It was supposed to be the biggest day of my career. I was supposed to go to the office, present my team's project, and get promoted to manager of our Oregon branch. It was supposed to be the highlight of my career. Wasn't supposed to end like this. Not to me. It all began when I left my luxury apartment complex and saw the driver I ordered parked on the side of the road. It didn't look terribly old, but by no means was it a newer car either. I distinctly remember noticing the tinted windows on the car. I liked my privacy, and I made a mental note to get tinted windows when I get a car for myself. It didn't make much sense to own a car in the big city, but as soon as I managed to escape to Oregon, I wanted to drive my own car and feel free as a bird. I got into the car and was immediately hit with this musty smell, like some liquid had spilled ages ago, but never dried. It was moldy and egg-like, and it was one of those smells that made the air feel warmer than it was. I couldn't even consider ordering a new car, though. If I had, I would have been late for my meeting, so I decided I could let the rancid smell slide. I got in and sat there for a good 10 seconds without the driver doing anything. I didn't have time for this. I was already on a tight schedule, and the smell wasn't making it any better. "Hey, bud, didn't they teach you the pedal on the right makes it go?" I chuckled, but the guy gave no reaction. Just as I was about to say something else, the driver finally grabs the steering wheel, and we start moving. I tried to roll down my window to get some fresh air. The button on my door didn't do anything. I looked toward the driver. "Hey, buddy, can you roll down the window for me?" Again, no reaction. This was ridiculous. I was already getting ready to give the driver a 1-star review. I suppose all I could hope for at this point is that the smell didn't linger on my brand new suit. I glanced out the window and saw we were making a turn that wasn't leading to my office. I knew it all along. This was a scam. This driver was probably taking a detour so he could charge me for extra miles. "Stop the car immediately." No answer. Instead, the car doors made a synchronized click sound that showed they were locked. I was fuming by this point. I started yelling, "Hey, what's this all about? Let me out of the car." "Nothing. I said let me out. Do you know who you're messing with? I can have you sued and fired. Let me out now and I won't have your ass thrown in jail." My words didn't seem to reach him. He just sat there, driving. I'd reached my limit, and I lunged forward and grabbed him by his shoulders to make sure he couldn't ignore me. The driver's head shot back at me, but the way it happened was so unnatural. The rotation was too smooth, and it started and stopped way too abruptly. That was when I noticed all the uncanny details to the man's face. He looked more like a wax figure than any actual person, with rubbery skin and fake-looking hair. I was so taken aback by these details that I didn't even notice the revolver in his right hand until I heard the click from it. The man, if you could call it that, opened its jaw slightly. This rough, choppy audio came from its mouth. It was like it was talking over a broken speaker, and it gave its voice this almost growling quality to it.
"Sir, stay seated or this ride's gonna end much too early."
All my anger melted into fear, then slowly welled back into fury. Did I seriously have to listen to the likes of this thing? Was I really being forced to meet its demands? I was tempted to move my hand ever so slightly from the driver's shoulders to around its neck. Fortunately, I was stopped by the last bit of my reasonable mind. This thing looked robotic. It probably didn't even need to breathe. Moreover, it was holding the only weapon in the car. I reluctantly slid back into my seat. The driver placed the gun into its lap and returned to its original driving position. When the driver wasn't looking, I quietly peeked at my phone. I thought if I could just dial 911, they could track my phone and help me out. To my apprehension, there was no signal. Midnight Stories. Without looking back, the thing said in its low, choppy voice,
"The car blocks all radio signals, buddy. You're completely cut off from the outside world."
How did that thing know I was looking at my phone? I could have sworn I was being subtle. How could it have known? I began studying the vehicle. There must have been hidden cameras somewhere that could see me. As if it read my mind, The driver's hand moved up to the rear view and tapped it in an animatronic-like way.
The camera's here if you were wondering. Be sure to smile for everyone once the program starts. We're live in 20 seconds.
My mind flooded with a million different things that could have meant. What do you mean live? What the hell do you want to do with me?
Sorry, buddy. Have a strict policy against context. If you want answers, we're gonna need some answers first.
Before I could say anything more, this bouncy band music started blaring on the radio. Red, green, and blue lights started flashing from every corner of the car. The lights didn't make the inside of the car any brighter. They just colored the dinginess with desaturated hues. The driver's voice switched from low and somber to upbeat and bubbly.
Hello, all you lovely folks tuning in today.
Now the driver's voice sounded like some announcer talking over an old radio. It didn't move an inch as it spoke, which felt disassociating from the tone it was giving off. It continued to speak.
Unbelievable. I see we have a record number of viewers tuning in today. It's well over 50,000. Haha. I know how excited you all are for this one, so let's get right to it.
The driver's head shot backwards to look right at me, rotating without the rest of its body. It still drove perfectly normal, but still, having its head looking away from the road like that made me uneasy. It stared at me for a moment before it continued speaking.
You know him. You love him. It's Hamish Wilson.
A soundtrack of an audience cheering played over the car speakers. When it stopped, the driver continued.
Hi there, Hamish, and welcome to End of the Line, the most popular live game show on the dark web today. We'll get to the games in a moment, but first, your fans want to hear from you. Go on, Hamish. Give them your signature greeting.
I didn't know how to react. The lights just kept flashing, and the music was still quietly playing in the background. 50,000 viewers? The dark web? A game show? I couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. I sat there like a stupid deer in the headlights until the words finally came out of my mouth. I don't care what you want me to do, but you'll never get away with this. Let me out. I'm not playing your fucked up game. The laugh track played over the car speakers, which really got my blood boiling. Was I some joke to them?
That's classic Hamish for you, the driver responded. Sorry, buddy. You're playing whether you like it or not. We've been keeping an eye on you for a very long time, Hamish. And I think I speak for everyone when I say we all want to see where your story goes from here. Right, folks?
Again, the track of the audience cheers played. If I wasn't so overwhelmed by everything, I'd find all of it ridiculous.
All right, Hamish, let's go over the rules. This is End of the Line, the game show where you'll have to answer a series of questions until this car runs out of gas and reaches the end of its line. All you have to do is survive until then, and we'll let you go free. There'll be 3 rounds of questions. Each round you'll get 3 strikes before you're out. And when that happens, it'll be the end of your line instead. Any questions?
5 seconds passed without me saying anything. You can't blame me for that. There was a lot to take in the situation. But before I could say anything, the driver said,
Aw, it's okay if you're shy.
In the most condescending tone imaginable. That driver's face was so lifeless and fake-looking. It pissed me off and made its remarks all the more irritating. I wondered to myself if there was any way to torture a robot. The driver continued.
Why don't we get some callers on the line? I'm sure there are people who are just dying to speak with you.
A ringing sound came from the driver's mouth, and then there was the voice of someone different.
Hello, am I on?
It was an older-sounding man with a southern accent. The driver's voice switched back.
Hello, caller. Anything you'd like to say to our lovely contestant today?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of the show, and I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while.
Seeing a chance to reach out, I leaned in and yelled, Sir, anyone, please dial 911. I'm being held here against my will. I give no consent to any of this. Please help me. That damn laugh track came on again. The southern man's voice was laughing, too.
Sorry, pal, but I'm rooting against you on this one. Hope you wind up with a bullet between the eyes.
Thanks for calling,
the driver said before hanging up. I was frozen. I finally talked to someone, a real person, and he wanted me dead. I slowly slid back into my seat. The putrid air felt even heavier going into my lungs. I think this was the first time I was starting to feel defeated. There was another ringing sound from the driver's mouth. Then a little girl's voice came on the phone. She spoke with more pauses between her words, and honestly, didn't sound any older than 8.
Hi, my mommy and I wanted to say Good luck killing that man.
Aw, thank you, sweetie. Are you and your mom watching the show together?
Yeah, she said I'm finally old enough. This was my first time watching.
Well, miss, this is quite the episode to get started with. Do you have anything to say to our contestant, Hamish?
Mm-hmm. Get all the questions wrong.
The laugh track played. I clenched my fist and lowered my head to restrain myself. This was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever been subjected to. I was humiliated. I was powerless, and I couldn't do anything to help myself out of it. I imagined the executives at the office waiting for my career-changing presentation. I imagined a version of myself there, blowing everybody away and being congratulated for all my sacrifices. I imagined myself shaking hands with the executives and packing up my office to finally escape to Oregon. That was all I wanted. And this robot driver in this prison of a car was keeping me from that. I wanted nothing more than to get out as soon as I could and try to repair the damage.
Thank you for calling, miss. Say hi to your mom and enjoy the show.
The driver hung up the call. I looked up at the driver and glared into its eyes. I couldn't do anything except play along. Just get your damn game started and get it over with. The driver's head twisted to face forward again.
Now, Mr. Wilson, watch the language. Children are watching. But I'll let it slide this time, since we love enthusiasm around here.
I sat back in my seat. I wanted nothing more than for this to be done with.
The first round of questions will be focused on the city and all the horrible things that happened here. Your first question.
The driver dropped its bubbly voice and switched back to the low, broken-sounding one.
Where was your first date with Rachel?
The question sent shivers down my body. My immediate reaction was wondering how they could possibly have learned that. Then I realized this was a trick. They wanted me to think they knew something they didn't actually. I thought it over carefully and was sure that there was no way anyone besides me and Rachel could have known where our first date was. I gave a smirk. I'll pass. Give me the answer. All the colorful lights turned red. The driver's head turned around ever so slightly, and the announcer voice came back.
Oof, that's rough, buddy. Your first date was at the Drunk Opossum Bar and Bistro. As a matter of fact, it's just down the street.
That was right. No, that wasn't possible. What kind of show was this? Who were these people running this whole thing? What was going on? Millions of questions flooded my mind. My stomach started churning. What were they trying to do? And why were they asking about Rachel?
Now, I know you didn't really forget, right, Hamish? You just wanted to test the waters to see if we knew. We've been watching you for some time, buddy. We watched you. We followed you. We listened through your own phone and computer. Don't think for a second we don't know something. Anywho, that was your first strike. 2 more and it's gonna be one of our shorter episodes. Let's move on to question 2. Where did you two buy your first apartment together?
I decided I needed to answer these seriously now. I didn't know where these questions were going, but I couldn't afford to aggravate my captor. It was the Bloomsdale Apartments just off Main Street.
Correct!
The driver's voice said enthusiastically. This time, the colorful lights turned into a yellow-white color.
Keep getting answers like that right and you'll be out of here in no time. Question 3. What color were Rachel's eyes?
Easy. They were blue. The lights turned red, and the announcer in his cheery voice said,
Sorry, buddy. That's strike 2. The correct answer was green.
They slipped up. They showed they didn't know what they were talking about, and I caught them. You're wrong. We dated for 5 years, and I know for a fact that Rachel had blue eyes. The driver's head turned to the side. Its hand reached towards me. It was pinching a driver's license. The driver said in its growling voice,
Read it.
I took the license. It was Rachel's. No. This couldn't be real. I checked all the information on the card. Everything was right. I was almost certain that this was Rachel's actual driver's license. But under the section for eye color, it distinctly said her eyes were green. I looked at Rachel's picture. I couldn't deny that they looked green. How did I miss something like that? No, that wasn't the point. They took her driver's license. How long were they following me? Hey, I yelled. What the hell's this? What are you doing with Rachel's license?
Is there any problem, Mr. Wilson?
The driver said in its lower voice as its fingers curled around the gun. I couldn't let this go, but this was an argument I wasn't going to win. Clenched my teeth and said, No, there's no problem.
Fantastic!
The driver said in its upbeat voice.
Now, the show's always a bit slow to start, so we're gonna need to do a rapid-fire challenge to get all these questions in. Are you ready?
I quietly nodded my head. The robot let go of the gun.
Then let's get started. How long were you and Rachel dating before you proposed?
6 months.
How long were you engaged before meeting her mother?
I met her mom after we were engaged for a month.
What did her mom think of you?
She didn't like me.
Did Rachel's mother want you two to get married?
No, she did not. What the hell kinds of questions are these?
More specific, what did Rachel's mother say to her?
Her mom said if we got married, they wouldn't speak again.
And how did Rachel respond?
She said if that was the case, then she'd never talk to her again. The yellow lights finally came on and that jazzy music started playing again. It felt uncomfortable bringing up all these old memories. And for what? For some creep's entertainment? Why me? I thought to myself. Why is this happening to me?
Congratulations, Hamish. You've just survived round 1. How are you feeling?
I rubbed my palm against my head. I really couldn't grasp any of this. I feel awful. Does that make your audience happy? The laugh track played. Out of frustration, I punched the window as hard as I could. It didn't crack, but it sure hurt my hand. When the audio track stopped, the driver said,
Careful, buddy. We wouldn't want you getting hurt, unless we do it, of course.
I really wanted to hurt this driver.
Now, as a reward for getting past the round, you're allowed to ask one question. Within reason, of course. So tell us, buddy, what would you like to know?
I didn't take this reward very seriously. I knew this thing wasn't going to tell me anything incriminating, or anything I wanted to know for that matter. Still, one question could help me out. Who are you? I waited for an answer.
I represent a group of concerned citizens who feel like you needed to be on the show.
I suppose it was my own fault for getting my hopes up. We drove on the highway for about an hour. Along the way, we took several dozen viewer calls, all of them saying things along the lines of, "Good luck, hope you die." I keep trying to ask all these people to help or tell me what's going on, but each person laughed and refused to say anything. There were children, the elderly, men, women, people from what sounded like around the world. They were all calling and telling me to die already. It was starting to weigh me down. I wanted the calls to stop, but every time one ended, it was right on to the next one. At one point, I snapped at the driver and said, "Stop taking those damn calls. They're driving me insane." Unsurprisingly, the driver still played call after call after call. It didn't stop until the driver finally said,
We're here, ladies and gentlemen, at the destination for round 2.
The applause soundtrack played, but I couldn't even be annoyed at it anymore. Anything was better than those calls. We were driving along a cliffside road. To the right was a wall of rock, and to the left was the sea. It was the afternoon by this point, but with the tinted windows, it felt much later than it was. The driver's head snapped around to look at me.
Round 2 has officially begun. Question 1. How many cars crash into the water each year?
I looked out at the ocean. I didn't like what the question implied, and I especially didn't like how it was a question I'd have no way of answering. I decided to take a guess. 10,000. The lights turned red. In that low voice, the driver said,
Incorrect. The answer was 11,000.
Then I felt myself getting pressed into the seat as the driver slammed on the gas pedal. The car roared as we approached well over 100 miles per hour. The car swerved between the lanes in the road. At some points, the car even scraped against the metal rail that was guarding the drop into the ocean. I grabbed onto whatever I could, instinctually believing that might somehow help. In a panic, I yelled, "Hey, slow down or you're gonna get us both killed!" But the driver just kept staring at me with those lifeless eyes. It dawned on me. This thing was already dead. I was the only one in real danger.
Question 2. When did you and Rachel get married?
What? April 7th, 2013.
Correct. Question 3. When did you two get divorced?
There was a swerve in the road. The car went into another lane and scraped against the rail. Sparks flew that were accompanied by harsh, screeching sounds. I had to ask the driver to repeat the question. After it did, I said, April 8th, 2015.
Correct. Question 4. Why did you two get divorced?
I don't know. She didn't care about my career or see how it was important to me.
Incorrect. That's strike 2.
Then a voice came out of the driver's mouth. It was Rachel's, and she was crying. In between loud sobs and sniffles, she said,
I don't know if I can keep doing this, Mom. He's always at work. I hardly get to see him. Why can't he just be there for us?
I was stunned to hear Rachel's voice again. I never knew she said anything like that. The driver's intimidating voice came back.
Question 5. On your second anniversary at 5 p.m., what were your plans with Rachel?
I paused for a long while, trying to think about what happened that night. the driver said more forcibly now as the car swerved violently.
What were your plans, Hamish?
We were supposed to go out to dinner together. Correct. Question 6.
Where were you on the night of your second anniversary at 5 p.m.?
That's right. I was at the office. I had a chance to get promoted, but I needed to work extra hours to make a good impression. There was a long pause from the driver before it said,
Question 7. Did you do anything for Rachel on your second anniversary?
What kind of question was this? I was working to give us both a better life, but I felt like that wasn't the answer the driver wanted to hear. I grit my teeth and answered, No, I didn't do anything.
Correct. Question 8. We'll try this again. Why did you and Rachel get divorced?
I took a deep breath of rotten air because I wasn't there for her. I was at work. I hated that this was the answer I was being funneled into, but anything to get this ride to stop. The driver paused again after the answer. Then it responded.
Correct. Question 9. How did you two get back together a month later?
She came over to my place and we talked it out. We said we'd try again. The car skimmed against the cliff rocks right next to me. Could you be more careful?
Correct. Final question. On your anniversary, when you were at the office, you were sleeping with the secretary. How long did the relationship with the secretary last after you got back together with your wife?
What? I was about to yell at the top of my lungs when I saw a turn ahead of us. If we didn't slow down, we would crash right through the barrier into the ocean. There was a part of me that genuinely felt like we were gonna die. A year, all right? I was with her for a year. Now stop the car. Sure enough, the car slowed down. It stayed in the lane it was supposed to, and it managed to make the turn with no problem. My body had this anticipation for some violent crash, and it gradually dissipated as I realized we were safe. There was a moment where I was relieved, but it was just a moment, as it started to set in what I just confessed. Still using the lower voice, the driver said,
Now you get one question.
There was an obvious question for me to ask, but I was afraid to know the answer to it. Why are you doing this to me? I finally asked. Maybe I imagined it, but it almost sounded like the driver faintly chuckled. It responded,
We know everything, Hamish. You know why you're here.
I looked right at the rearview mirror that had the camera in it. Tens of thousands of people heard me confess. Was I being recorded? Was this some smear campaign against me? No, I couldn't let this thing intimidate me like that. I had to get that fear out of my head. It didn't matter what I said because this whole kidnapping scheme was illegal. There's no way I'd be seen as anything but the victim in this scenario. I was safe. I just had to keep telling myself this. All along our drive to the next location, the audience was calling again. This time they were more aggressive and kept reminding me of what an awful human being I was. I just had to keep reminding myself that I was the victim here. An old lady called to rant about how cheating on my wife as we were getting back together was horrendous. The teenage boy kept swearing and said he wished I was dead already. I had to let all that roll off me. No matter what I confessed, I could still get myself out of this. I kept a close eye on the gas meter as we drove. As hours passed, the needle got closer to being out of gas. I anticipated the moment when this nightmare would finally end. It was night by this point, and I was sure by then my bosses had tried to call me 100 times. Whatever promotion I was promised that day was long out of my reach. Maybe they had already handed it to Jerry, my coworker, who was always trying to shine over me. I just couldn't get out of my head the image of him getting the promotion instead of me. It infuriated me. We drove along a forest path. I couldn't even remember the last time I saw another car. Was I going to be dropped off in the middle of the woods even if I won? It wouldn't surprise me. When I thought it couldn't get any worse, the car made a turn off the road and started driving into the woods. It cautiously swerved around trees and avoided large boulders. The road was rough and horrendously uneven, but clearly the driver didn't care about that. Maybe another hour passed, and we came to a scene I was not expecting. It was a dozen or so cars piled in one area. I looked around at them. They were all average-looking cars, with nothing notable about them, except that they all had heavily tinted windows so you couldn't see inside them. As I noticed that detail, our car drove up and parked amongst the junkyard. The engine was still running. The gas needle was hovering on empty. This had to be the final round, right? The driver didn't move. It turned off the phone calls from the audience members, and we sat there in silence. It occurred to me that the driver hadn't spoke since the end of the last round. It felt like there was just some mannequin sitting in the front seat. That feeling shattered when the driver picked up its gun, sat up, and began crawling over to the back of the car. It moved slowly at first. Then in one burst, it had its empty hand on my chest, pressing me into the car seat. I struggled, but I couldn't move. I tried to pull its arm away, but beneath the rubbery skin was what felt like an iron rod. Even though there were cushions behind me, the force against me made it difficult to breathe. I thought for sure my ribs would snap if it pressed any harder. Then I heard the click of its gun. The driver held the gun just out of my reach, pointing it right at my face. The driver's voice seemed especially choppy and distorted now, being just barely understandable.
This will be your final round of questions. Answer correctly, and you'll go free.
I could barely breathe, but I managed to let out, "Fine, get on with it."
Question 1. When did your wife find out about the affair?
I took the deepest breath I could and answered, 8 months after we got back together.
Correct. Question 2. How did she respond to finding out?
Not well. She couldn't believe I'd do such a thing.
Correct. Question 3. Did you want to leave your wife for your mistress?
No, there was no way they could possibly know this. I had to draw the line. Even if they listened in on me, there was no way they could possibly know the answer to this. The driver pressed my chest harder. I swear I heard a crack. Fine. Yes, I did. I wanted to leave Rachel for Susan.
Correct. Question 4. Would Rachel let you divorce her?
No, she did not.
Then you must have been desperate to leave her. You must have wanted to leave her by any means to go start your new life with your mistress. But there was a problem. Your reputation. You couldn't leave your wife like that. Rumors would spread and affect how people saw you at your company. You couldn't have that.
I was sweating. No, this thing didn't know what it was talking about. There was no way.
And we found out exactly what you did, Hamish. We know. We've been tracking you for a long time now, because we know what kind of horrid human being you are. Final question, Hamish. Where did you bury the body?
I don't know.
Strike 1. Where is her body?
It's you. Fine. She's in the forest just outside of town.
Strike 2, Hamish. Don't lie to us. Not now. Where is her body?
No, it wasn't possible. The only way they'd know it was a lie is if you know where she is. Then why do you need to hear me say it? Why put me through all this torture? It isn't about knowing where she is. We need you to confess it. Final warning. There was no denying it. My life was over either way. I should at least get out. Up the Artican Mountains, off mile marker 227. She's buried somewhere around there. Now let me go this instant. The driver did not move. The yellow lights began flashing and the overly upbeat music began playing. But there was something about the driver that was different. The way it looked at me. I could almost swear I saw anger in those eyes. It didn't seem like a lifeless thing anymore. Something was happening behind those eyes. Something primal. I looked frantically between the driver and the gun it was holding. I could just feel that it was going to bang! I screamed from the pain. When I finally looked down, I saw red staining the sleeve of my suit. I couldn't believe it. I was still alive. The driver flung the door open and shoved me outside the door like a rag doll. The car door slammed behind me, and I heard the doors lock. At that moment, the engine died, and it was like nothing had happened. I was on the ground, dumbfounded by everything that had happened, and trying to process it. That's when I started to laugh. I was free. I was free from this nightmare. I got out of that kidnapping situation scot-free. I didn't care what they had to say. I was the victim after all of this. They couldn't present their evidence. They couldn't get me arrested. I could still get away with it all. I had to hike for hours to get a cell signal. And as soon as I did, I dialed 911 and told them I was lost in the woods with a gunshot wound. Sure enough, they found me. I was taken to the hospital and treated for my wounds. I got my own hospital room and was well taken care of. It was so nice to be back in a civilized society. While I was there, I made phone calls to the office. The gunshot wound turned out to be the perfect excuse for not making it to the meeting. I played up the drama a bit to get sympathy, and the executives ate it up. What were they going to do? Deny someone who was hospitalized? I was given my promotion in that same conversation. A week later, I was about to be discharged from the hospital when some police came up to me. All they said was they wanted me to get in the car with them. I kept asking why, and all they said was I was being detained for questioning. They received an anonymous tip from a concerned citizen about a buried body up the Artican Mountains. Off mile marker 227, I ended up convicted and sentenced to life in prison. I didn't deserve to lose everything like this. I was so close to being free and away from everything. I could finally get away and start my life over without anything holding me back. Now I'm behind bars with no one willing to listen to me. I keep saying I was the victim. I was kidnapped. I deserved to be free. But everything I said fell on deaf ears. Either what I said was crazy, there was no evidence to back it up, or I was just that killer no one gives a damn about. I fall asleep every night telling myself, it's not fair, just so someone will listen to me. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Not to me. Unfortunately, this story is already over, but you can help us extremely if you click in the middle now and follow our playlist. Keep listening to all our stories now to fall asleep. Click in the middle now. Have fun.